You are expected to work 40 hours, work on a daily basis, make a new meal 3 times a day, keep your room clean, run errands, meditate, make time for hobbies, walk your dog, listen to stupid people, give you stupid tasks, and somehow in between all of that, still make time for 8 hours of sleep. And you want to read more? I grew up with a love of books, but like most people, as life went on, I slowly, without even realizing it, convinced myself that it just wasn't a priority anymore. Then, back in 2016, I challenged myself to read 1 book a week for a total of 52 books in a year, and I did it. How did I pull this off? My first tip is to treat reading like content and not an experience. We're so used to approaching articles and social media as this like bite-sized filler content throughout our day. So if you are standing in line, pop open TikTok. You sit down for lunch, open a 10-minute YouTube video. Whereas with something like a movie, we actually have to find time in our week to sit down and carve out a full 2 hours to experience this. It's not something that we're just casually digesting in the downtime of our day. And a lot of us treat reading this way as well. But when you start treating books like they are content and not this long, intense experience, then suddenly there's a lot more times in your day to dedicate to reading, even if it's just a few bits at a time. So if there's nothing else that you take away from this video, this is the most important part, because just with this mind shift alone, you will read so many more books than you ever could have thought. And that leads me into my second point, which is to make sure that books are accessible to you at all times. You want to make reading as frictionless as possible. This means keeping the Kindle app on your iPhone so that you can just open it up and read a few pages if you're like on the toilet or waiting for the bus to come. You also want to make sure you have a book with you at all times when you're ready to read. So this can be your ebook or a physical copy, but keep something by your bedside, keep something in your purse, in your backpack, any other place where you find that you have a lot of downtime. You want to have a book right there ready for you to grab and read. Another really key part of availability is making sure that you have another book ready and queued up to go when you're done reading the one you have right now. So if you're like me and you love using the library, then you already know that some books can have months and months of wait time. And what I like to do to circumvent that is to pick maybe like 5 or 10 books that I really want to read in the next few months. And I will go and put myself on the waiting list for all of them so that by the time I finish a book, usually one has come off that waiting list and is ready for me to check out. If you want to buy your own books new, this is a little bit easier because all you have to do is just go on Amazon, go to your local bookstore, maybe buy like 4 or 5 at a time, and then just have them in a stack ready to go whenever you're done with the current book you're reading. Audiobooks. Audiobooks are the secret sauce of reading more. This is honestly the biggest factor that allowed me to finish my book a week challenge. Back when I was commuting 3 hours a day, audiobooks saved me. I would go through maybe 1 or 2 books, just playing them in the background without ever actually having to carve out specific time for myself to read. You can listen to them when you're in the car, when you're working out, when you're grocery shopping, when you're cleaning and doing chores. They're also a really great option if you are someone who has any sort of like learning disability, eye problems, attention problems, maybe you're just not able-bodied. I think this is really the best option for someone who is truly always on the go and busy, and you're struggling to even find like 10 minutes out of your day to just sit down and be quiet. I mean, I suggest you try and find that time because I think that's good for you, but if you can't, that's just not the season of life you're in. Audiobooks are your best friend. Now, my next tip is something that took me a really long time to understand and to kind of like ingrain in my reading habits, and that is to find your flow. Most of our first exposures to reading is when we're in school and we have teachers telling us that we need to read certain topics that we might not be interested in, or just like certain genres that we're not really digging at the time, and you have to force yourself to do it because it's part of the curriculum, it's part of your syllabus, and you want to not fail your class. In the real world, no one is grading you. You can read comics, you can read fantasy, you can read pop psych, whatever you want, whatever makes sense to you, and whatever you find interesting, read that. And so many people don't seem to grasp this concept. They still think that if they read the first Harry Potter book, they have to read the second, and then they have to read the third, even if they didn't enjoy the first one. Which if you didn't enjoy Harry Potter, like, something's wrong with you. Or they tell themselves that they had this long ambitious reading list for the year and they have to knock off every single one even though there's this new book that came out that they're really interested in. Just remember, there are no rules to this. Reading is for you. It's for you to find pleasure, to learn something. When you're really loving a subject or a topic, dive into it. Go as far into it as you want, explore everything, and have fun. Now, my next tip comes from another bad habit that we all learned in school, which is to drop the cover-to-cover expectations. You are 100% in control of what you read, and that means if you don't like a book, you don't have to read it. You can drop it a page in, a chapter in, 5 pages before the ending. We're all taught to feel guilty for not finishing what we start, but when it comes to reading, there's no obligation to finish something if you don't want to. There's also no shame in skimming, especially if you are reading a nonfiction book. Some people like doing this with fiction. Personally, I like enjoying my fiction, so I'm not a skimmer when it comes to stories. But if you have something that is educational, it's totally fine to go through the chapters and actually look to see what appeals to you. Not every single section or topic of a book is going to be something that you need to read or that you're interested in learning. And when you do start a chapter, pick the parts that you actually want to learn from, and then when you feel like you've gotten the idea and you don't need any more examples, skip on to the next section. And if you want to take this even farther, there's a lot of apps and services like Blinkist, for example, which will go through and summarize the main points of a book. I think this can be really useful for deciding what books you want to put on your reading list, because not every topic really needs to be drawn out for 300 or 400 pages. If you go through the summary and you see that there are a lot of points that you want to explore further, then you know that you maybe want to put that on your reading list. If you feel like you kind of already grasped the topic based on just the bullet points that you're reading through, then you can skip it and move on to the next one. Now, something else that can be really helpful for a lot of people, especially if you need something a little more concrete to work with, is to set a goal. And the goal doesn't have to be necessarily like set in stone, but I think it is good to set where your sights are and then work backwards from there. So again, going back to the example where I wanted to read 52 books in a year, I knew that that was where I wanted the endpoint to be, so I broke that down into 1 book a week. And I knew that if I was going to read 1 book a week and it took me an average of maybe 10 hours to finish a book, that meant I was reading 1 to 2 hours a day. And then from there, I could actually fit in to see where can I squeeze in 1 to 2 hours of reading time. Can I listen to an audiobook in the car for half an hour? Maybe listen to it while I'm warming up on the treadmill, and then see how I can incorporate it into my schedule. And my last tip, which is probably the most important one, is that you need to make sure that you are reading for you. Reading is not a competition, okay? Again, I'm gonna go back to the school example. We are not being graded here. No one is looking at you and thinking you are a good person or a bad person based on how much you read. It's all just for personal satisfaction and learning. I mean, if the fastest reader in the world intentionally decides to slow down, then you can too. When we read for the aesthetic or to impress other people or because we want to prove to everyone else that we're not like other girls, when we do for anything other than the simple sake of the joy of reading, you're gonna face resistance and it's gonna be harder for you to pick up a book every day. So again, make sure if you're gonna pick up a book, the only reason is because you want to, which is actually a pretty good metaphor about life to end this on. I am wishing you all the luck in your reading goals for 2023, and if you want to know my favorite way to track my reading progress, then you should check out this video next.